Hello and welcome to Father's Refuge podcast. My name is James Moffitt, and I will be your host. This is episode 6, entitled Jessica's Final Moments, When Grief Became Real. Jessica passed away sometime between 1 and 2 a.m. on August 5th, 2001. I knew that the time was near because Jessica's breathing became more labored as time passed. Katie, my wife, was asleep, and so were our other 2 children. I was wide awake because I did not want to wake up the next morning and find out that Jessica passed during the night. I remember going into her room and watching her laying in the hospital bed. I remember telling her that it was okay to stop fighting. Jessica was the brave soul in our family. She understood that she was not long for this earth. Jessica was always trying to make us feel better about it. Once I told Jessica it was okay to let go, she took 1 or 2 more breaths, and then it was over. The 14-month battle to beat cancer was finally done. No more trips to the children's hospital late at night because she seemed to be getting worse. No more treatments, no more chemo or radiation. No more trips down the hallway in her wheelchair as other parents pretended that we were not there. No one wants to be reminded that our precious children may not survive. Once Jessica was gone, I went into the bedroom where Katie was sleeping and woke her up. I gave her the news, and we both went into Jessica's room and said our goodbyes. We made the usual phone calls to our pastor and funeral home. We'd already made the arrangements with them. When 6 a.m. rolled around, people started to arrive. Our pastor showed up, and not too long after that, the funeral home workers arrived. I remember how they were gentle with Jessica and encouraged me to help move her from the hospital bed to the gurney and walked her out of the house and down to the vehicle that would transfer her to the funeral home. Our friends next door, who happened to be our landlord, came over to be with us when Jessica was being moved. I remember that I was in shock, and there were several outward signs of emotions from several of the ladies that were there. I guess you could say we were like a ship without a rudder. Our family was floating in limbo, letting the wind and waves of emotions move us along. I want to say that we had the funeral for Jessica within 3 days of her passing. We had the service for her at Libran Funeral Home in Goose Creek, South Carolina. I remember that there were family members from Texas in attendance, as well as the pastor from our church in Bluffton, South Carolina, who showed up. Our pastor from Grace Fellowship Church in Goose Creek agreed to do the service for us. Pastor Tom likes to get the children to come up front during the church services and have a mini service for them so they could feel included. Pastor Tom did the same thing for the children on this day. I remember that he was reading from a book that held memories about Jessica, what she liked and disliked, or her favorite moments in her life. I remember that he choked up a couple of times. Right in the middle of the service, a train went through Goose Creek, and the funeral home was very close to that intersection. In my mind's eye, I could see Jessica jumping up out of the casket and running across the street and hopping on the train, waving goodbye. To this day, I think about Jessica when I hear a train whistle. Then there was the trip to where Jessica would be laid to rest. That was the most difficult moment for me. I could not bear to watch them lower the casket into the ground. Katie and I went up to the house where the family members were received, and we sat there and talked amongst ourselves. Katie's sister, Lisa, stayed outside and was present for the event of her being lowered. Lisa was very fond of our Jessica and went to great personal expense to drive from Seguin, Texas to Goose Creek, South Carolina to be with us. Now that the final chapter of Jessica was over, the grief experience was starting to settle in for our family. One of the stages of grief is denial. I guess you could say that we were walking through a fog and still holding on to the fact that there might be some sort of hope. We were in denial that despite our clinging to hope that Jessica would be healed here on earth, that was not our reality. Our reality was that Jessica in physical form was no more. As a family, we attempted to pick up the pieces and move on with life without Jessica. The only problem is that we were constantly reminded that Jessica was gone. We had to make phone calls and return the hospital bed and other medical equipment and supplies. No one was in a hurry to pick those things up, so every time we would go by her room and look in, we were reminded. On several occasions, I would swear that I could see Jessica laying in the bed looking back at me. I do not remember if we were still homeschooling our other 2 children or not. At some point, we decided it was best for them to go to public school. The grief journey was unknown territory for us as a family. While Jessica was still alive, we attended a parent support group at the hospital. After Jessica was gone, we were no longer attending that support group because there were parents there that were still clinging to hope that their children would survive cancer. Slowly but surely, the normal routines returned, and we went on with life without Jessica. Jessica was not there with us physically, but she was very much with us in our memories. Everywhere we turned, there was something to remind us of her. Looking back 24 years, I wish that someone would have mentioned the need for us to get grief support. I do not remember anyone suggesting that we find a family therapist or counseling for our other two children. Just as you do not get a manual for when your children are born, you do not get a manual that gives you specific steps to live life with grief. Do you remember that storm I talked about in an earlier episode? Well, that storm had come and gone and left a path of destruction. Not so much physical destruction, but mental and emotional destruction. As I remember it, Katie and I did not talk much about grief or the emotions we were experiencing. The emotions were too raw at the time, and the triggers were very constant. A song on the radio, going places like church, or where we would go out to eat as a family. Everywhere we turned, there were reminders of our Jessica. I tried to cope with my emotions by suppressing them, shoving them deep down into my being and attempting to not think about them. Maybe they would just go away on their own. But no, they would rear their ugly heads when I would least expect it. Somehow, as a family, we were able to pick up the pieces and move on with life. We were not graceful about it. I guess we all managed our grief individually in our own way. Despite the wreckage and destruction, we remained together and moved on with our lives. Looking back, I know that seeing a therapist would not have changed our reality about Jessica being gone, but I believe that it would have given us the important coping skills that we needed to lessen some of the pain. Instead of being a ship without a rudder coasting across the water with no destination in mind, we would have been able to plot a course through the emotions and come out on the other side in better shape. If you're listening to this episode and this story resonates with you, then let me encourage you to do whatever it takes to get support for the grief you're experiencing. As men, many of us are not in touch with our emotions. Maybe we were taught as boys and young men that men do not cry. We do not entertain the thought of expressing emotions because that would tell the world how weak we are. This could not be furthest from the truth. It is okay to hurt and to deal with those emotions. As a married couple, you're not alone with this grief. Your spouse is dealing with the painful emotions of grief as well. Together, you both can seek out help individually and as a couple. Therapy will not remove the pain. Therapy can help you to understand it and learn how to move through it. Together, you can find healing and strength to move on. Together, you can work with your children so they can understand how to deal with the emotions of grief as well. If this episode resonates with you, you can reach out to me at fathersrefuge@proton.me. That's fathersrefuge@proton.me. Thank you for the privilege of your time, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye. Hello, everyone. James Moffitt here with Father's Refuge Podcast. Losing a child to cancer is a grief no parent should walk through alone. The Father's Refuge Podcast is a safe place for fathers and parents to share, heal, and find hope in the midst of heartbreak. I'm looking for fathers who are experiencing the grief of losing a child to cancer or are walking the treatment journey with their families. If you would be willing to share your journey with others, contact me at fathersrefuge@proton.me. That's fathersrefuge@proton.me. And now to our featured episode.